Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. We are here reacting to the news that Ryan Grubb has been fired by the Seahawks. They're looking for a new offensive coordinator. Just thought I'd give you my thoughts on it. Run through some potential replacements. If you want to join in the conversation, then feel free in the live chat. If you have any questions, you want to stick them in there, feel free. I will try and get through as many as possible. Super chatting is the best way to get in touch. If you send in a super chat, I will definitely address your comment or your question. So get those sent in to me. We've already got one very generous super chat already. I will come to that very shortly. But my initial thoughts on the news today is I'm not surprised at all. We have been talking about this for weeks, whether it's on the streams, whether it's on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. This has felt inevitable. It's felt inevitable because of the way that Mike Macdonald has taught, about the way that he wants his offense to be structured, about the way that he wants his offense to operate. When he was asked questions about the balance between the passing game and the running game, he was always talking about committing to the run. His answers were always very different to Ryan Grubb's. They would speak one week about trying to establish a running game. They'd do it for a week, really try and force it home early in games. Then the next week, back to throwing it 2-3 more times than they are running the ball. It just felt very early in the season that there was a disconnect between the way that Mike Macdonald wanted to do things and the way that Ryan Grubb wanted to do things. And therefore, as time was going along and things weren't getting better, it felt as if a parting was inevitable. It wasn't even just about the philosophy either. As the weeks were going by, and I think as teams had more tape, more understanding of what the Seahawks are trying to do with this new staff, you suddenly started to see some pretty disappointing trends. For example, the way that they used play action and didn't use the running game off play action. They weren't sort of having any play fakes on the running plays they were actually utilizing. There are people out there who've written quite a lot about this, who've spoken about this, who've highlighted this in clips. It's all out there for people to see on the internet. Their route spacing was strange at times. It just felt a little bit as if this was a college coach who was trying to switch to the NFL. They had head-scratching decisions when it came to that run-pass balance. For example, yesterday's a good example of this. You're 3rd and 1. It's the 4th quarter. You're winning by 2 points. You're trying to run some clock down at the same time. Instead of just running the ball, you're running for 5.5 yards a carry. Instead of running the ball in that situation, you ask Geno Smith to throw. He almost throws an interception and he's one really bad pass of the game. Like in that situation there, run the football. And there were too many situations like that. There were many situations in the season where they just needed to run for a yard, whether that's in the red zone or a key 4th down somewhere, or even a 3rd down and a 4th down, and they couldn't get a yard. That's really difficult. His screen game became incredibly predictable. The red zone suffered all year. And we came into this season with people talking about this is going to be a career year for DK Metcalf. He's going to go to another level this season. And he just fell away. And there'd be games like yesterday where in the first half he's involved. And in the second half, he was completely shut out and didn't have a target. He didn't even have a 1,000-yard season this year, DK Metcalf. So there were lots and lots of things that didn't seem to be working, on top of the fact that the two visions of Macdonald and Grubb didn't seem to match. So, like I said, it's felt for pretty much half a season now that this has felt inevitable. I've been talking about this on here, in our articles. You know, I've had a back and forth with Jason Puckett about this on Puck Sports, and I know that he didn't agree with us, but to me, it felt like it was going to happen, and it has happened. And I'm not surprised. And I have to say, I think the Seahawks have done the right thing. The worst thing you can do is, if you are not aligned with your offensive coordinator, you've got to go and get somebody who is. There's no, oh, we'll just give it another year and see how it goes. This is the NFL we're talking about here. Like, if something's not right, something's not right. You can't just give it another go. That's not how it works. It's not like a pair of shoes that, they're a bit uncomfortable today. I'll give them the rep till the end of the week. Oh, I'll give the offensive coordinator another season. No, if it's either working or it isn't. And if it isn't, you have a duty to make a change. However inconvenient that is. Of course, it's more convenient for the Seahawks to keep the same offensive coordinator, to have some consistency, to be able to sort of tell everybody, we believe that with another year, this thing is going to be rolling. If you don't believe those things, you have to move on. And they have moved on. So credit to the Seahawks, because it would have been very, very easy to be inactive in a situation like this, just in the same way that it would have been very, very easy a year ago to have just kept Pete Carroll. But they clearly want to set a standard, and therefore they're moving on. And this is the first thing they had to do, in my opinion. There's still a lot more things to do. They've got to fix the offensive line. The next defensive coordinator needs a better offensive line. But you couldn't just shout offensive line and as a reason for Ryan Grubb getting another go. There was so much more to the argument than that. And the next defensive coordinator is going to need a better offensive line, but it needed to be another offensive coordinator to get that opportunity, I'm afraid. And let me just say this before I move on to my next point. I'm not suggesting that Ryan Grubb is a terrible coach or a bad coach or he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm sure that he will probably go back to college now with Alabama and have a very, very good time with Kalen DeBoer again and will be very successful. He's not a bad coach, but he is, which this is just brutally honest, an NFL novice. And when you have a defensive-minded head coach who is young himself and is not the most experienced guy, who is looking after one side of the ball, the defense, and is basically saying, I need somebody else to run my offense for me with parameters as to what you want your offensive identity to be, that person has got to be experienced. They've got to know and understand the NFL. It was alarming to me listening to Mike McDonald last week talking about how they needed to build a staff around Ryan Grubb to help him understand the different schemes. And like, this coach has worked with Andy Reid, so therefore they're going to come from this DNA of offense. This coach is from McVay. This coach is from Shanahan. This is a Bill Parcells guy. This is a whoever. You know, we need somebody as offensive coordinator who understands all of these things, that isn't being told about these things as they learn on the job. Now, if Ryan Grubb was an offensive coordinator working for someone like, say, Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, it's totally different because they're going to run the offense and you're going to be there to input, to help with scheming, game planning, coming up with ideas, crafting things, coaching, you know, the day-to-day running of the offense, but you're not essentially going to be the head man of the offense. You cannot have a defensive-minded head coach and then an offensive coordinator working alongside him, who is an NFL novice. I understand why the Seahawks gave it a go with Ryan Grubb. It was an intriguing prospect, but I totally understand why they're moving on now and need to go with somebody who has NFL roots, NFL understanding, that has grown up in this game, that has worked with excellent NFL coaches and can drive this forward. Because there are so many defensive-minded coaches, I keep saying this, so many defensive-minded head coaches who fail in the NFL because they can't get the offense right. They can't get the right offensive coordinator. And the example I keep coming back to is, look at Dan Quinn with the Atlanta Falcons. When he had a great offensive coordinator, everything clicked, they went to a Super Bowl. Matt Ryan won the MVP. That is what can happen. When you have a change and Kyle Shanahan takes the Niners job and you end up with Steve Sarkisian and others, and it was nowhere near the same, Dan Quinn ends up being a 9-8 coach and he eventually is fired. Or an 8-8 coach, and he was fired. You have to get the offensive coordinator right. And you have to have a game plan for getting it right, and then that coordinator getting a head coaching job and moving on. That's life with a defensive-minded head coach. So they have to work at this. They have to make a change. And it doesn't mean that the next appointment's going to work as well. It may not, but they've got to keep looking until they find the guy. There's just no alternative to that. So they've made the right decision. I think this is a really good start to Seattle's offseason. I hope they're going to be as aggressive when it comes to fixing that offensive line. I was not encouraged by John Schneider saying they've never really been a free agency team when he was interviewed yesterday, because I do think they're going to have to spend some money on this offensive line and not just totally rely on the draft. And the reasons for that is because there are other positions in the draft I want to see them also be able to go and look at, aside from just the offensive line. And if they don't spend any money on the offensive line this offseason, they're going to be forced to reach for needs. And I hope they can avoid that. Anyway, who do I think could be potential replacements? So I'm going to go through the list. I'm guessing that's going to be about 10 minutes. I can see, like I say, there's some super chats coming in. If you have those questions and you want to super chat them in, go for it. And then I will come to those immediately afterwards. And we can talk about it. So the first, I'm just going to have a drink. First person that I want to bring up is the person who I think is going to get this job. I think Jake Peetz will be the next Seahawks offensive coordinator. He's been on the staff for a year. I get the sense that he and McDonald have bonded because McDonald has referenced him in interviews. They seem, at least, to be somewhat similar, sort of this modern coaching generation. Pete's would allow the Seahawks to have some continuity, and that doesn't mean keeping the same offense. It just means the language can be the same. You can use the same kind of words to describe routes, concepts, blocks, all of those things. But you can also tweak it and change it to a different man's philosophy and vision. And if over the last 12 months, Pete and McDonald have struck up a great relationship and think this is the partnership, then it would make sense for him to get a promotion. He is very, very experienced. His first job in the NFL was in 2012, 13 years ago, as the Jaguars' assistant quarterback coach. He then went to the Washington football team, where he was quality control coach on that loaded Washington staff that's famous around the league. Shanahan, McVay, everybody. He then went to the Raiders to be a senior offensive assistant. He was then promoted to quarterback coach in Oakland. From there, he went on to be Carolina Panthers running back coach and then was promoted to quarterback coach with Carolina. He then became the LSU offensive coordinator under Ed Orgeron and the quarterback coach as well. He only really left LSU because Ed Orgeron was fired that year. So he was going to move on because Ed Orgeron was moving on. And then he ended up with the LA Rams as an offensive assistant, reuniting with Sean McVay. And then he was promoted to passing game specialist before coming to Seattle. And he had some other jobs in college with Alabama and people like that in the past as well. So this is a 13-year coaching career. He has been around the league a lot. He's been around a lot of experienced coaches. He's been around Sean McVay. The McVay coaching tree is phenomenal. It includes Matt LaFleur. It includes Kevin O'Connell. It includes Liam Cohen in Tampa Bay. And it also includes Shane Waldron. But I don't think we should be put off Jake Peetz because Shane Waldron was the only one who failed of the names that have worked with Sean McVay. I think it makes a lot of sense to go with this guy. He was incredibly highly rated a year ago and was touted as a potential coordinator. I was shocked that the Seahawks were able to bring him to Seattle. And I would have absolutely no problem if he has struck up a bond with Mike Macdonald. If Mike Macdonald thinks he is the right guy for this job, if they appoint Jake Peetz, it's fine with me. And let's see how it goes. Clearly, the McVay offense is excellent. Clearly, it is balanced. It has incorporated bigger offensive linemen, which I like the idea of. I want the Seahawks to go big and physical up front. I want them to draft big offensive linemen and go after it in this offseason. And if Pete is going to bring that to Seattle from LA, because they've gone big, that's fine by me. Fine by me. So I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with Jake Peetz getting the job. And that is my prediction, that he will be promoted. I think they will do a search. I don't think it's going to be a pure coronation here of them just going out and giving him the job. They're going to speak to other people, but I think it will circle back to Jake Peetz and he will get the job. That's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right. I was right about Ryan Grubb leaving. My other prediction was that Jake Peetz would take over. We'll see if I'm right about that. Who are the other candidates? Josh McCown is a very interesting candidate. He's the quarterback coach in Minnesota. He's not an experienced coach, but he did have an 18-year playing career. For me, might be even more valuable than being a coach for 10, 12 years. He was in the NFL for 18 years. He studied however many playbooks because it was one team after another after another. He's been around so many different coaches. He's been around so many different ideas, so many different players. By the end of his career, he was being signed essentially to act, yes, as a backup quarterback, but then to also act as an extra coach. So this is a person who has been on this sort of pathway to coaching for a long time. He was almost given the Houston Texans head coaching job a few years ago. He went to Carolina with the I can't remember the guy's name, Reich, who was there, and then obviously when he got fired, he he departed as well. And then he's been with Kevin O'Connell. He is like Kevin O'Connell's right-hand man and is the guy who stands next to Kevin O'Connell on the sidelines and has done a tremendous job coaching Sam Darnold this year. So there's a lot to like there. Would he want to come and be Seattle's offensive coordinator? I'm not sure. Is he a bit too inexperienced as a coach? Does the 18-year playing career make a difference? It might do. I don't know whether they would have interest there, but he is somebody who I think is at least interesting. Do they go back to the Lions for Tanner Engström? There have been reports over the weekend that maybe Ben Johnson just doesn't fancy being a head coach, that for him, it's better to stay in Detroit, have a lot of success, that maybe he's happy to let Dan Campbell deal with the management of the whole roster. Being a head coach is more than just being a great schemer. It's about controlling everything. And maybe Ben Johnson would prefer to spend his days cooking up ways to attack opponents rather than having to deal with players complaining at him and stuff like that. You know, sort of really sort of going after what he wants to be. I think that is what we're going to be looking at here with him. Are they going to be having a look at Tanner Engström and maybe feeling he's not going to get the opportunity to replace Ben Johnson? And maybe he would like the chance to be a coordinator. Now, they interviewed him last time. He has worked with the Harbaughs, so there's a connection there. And there's absolutely no doubt when you look at what Detroit are doing, it's unbelievable. So I think getting somebody from that staff will be interesting and appealing. I kind of wish he got the job last year. I don't know whether he was interested in it. Maybe he'd have thought, I'll wait another year and I'll get this job. Maybe he just wants to stay and work with Ben Johnson. I don't know. But I think Engström's an interesting candidate who they might return to. There's Marcus Brady, who is an ex-quarterback in the CFL. He was an assistant quarterback coach in Indianapolis. That was his first NFL coaching job in 2018. Then he was promoted to the quarterback coach, then offensive coordinator. After he left the Colts, he went to the Eagles next as a consultant. Then he was promoted to senior offensive assistant. And this season, he was appointed as Jim Harbaugh's passing game coordinator with the Chargers. So he's got the Harbaugh connection, ex-player. Again, has been around playbooks, has been in Indianapolis, has been in Philadelphia, has been with Harbaugh. These are sort of good places to be before sort of embarking on becoming an offensive coordinator again. It's his second go-around, having done it with Indianapolis. He is quite highly regarded. He could be an interesting person that they want to speak to. You've got Joe Blameyer, who is in his second season as Kansas City Chiefs passing game coordinator. He's been with the Chiefs for 9 seasons. He's an Andy Reid guy. We know that John Schneider really likes Andy Reid guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they considered an interview with him. Mike Kafka with the Giants. He's getting, I think he's got a request. Maybe is it from the Bears or somebody for a head coaching job? He's somebody they went strongly after. Was seemingly a head coaching candidate once Carroll had gone. And then they went and interviewed him again for the offensive coordinator's job, and he got a new title in with the Giants. Is he going to stay and do that? Is he going to move on? What's his future? Do they go back to Mike Kafka? Again, another Andy Reid guy, very highly rated by Reid, who gave him a great reference, apparently. Maybe so. Potentially so. Josh Grizzard, Tampa Bay's second in command to Liam Cohen, went to Yale, intelligent. Is in his first season as the passing game coordinator with the Bucs. He's been an NFL coach for 8 years. He is being discussed as a hot coordinator candidate. May take over from Cohen if he leaves Tampa Bay. There's been a bit of talk that maybe they'll move Todd Bowles on when the playoffs are finished and just appoint Liam Cohen as the head coach in Tampa Bay. If that happens, then Grizzard might be the defensive coordinator there and might not want to move. But he's somebody I wanted to bring up. Clint Kubiak, is he leaving the Saints? He's had a long NFL career starting in 2013. Obviously, the son of Gary Kubiak. He's worked with Kyle Shanahan quite recently. He's called plays for the Saints this year, got off to a hot start. Then the injuries and everything took a toll on the Saints. Is he looking for another opportunity now? Would the Seahawks be interested in him? Would he be interested in them? It remains to be seen as they go about appointing their head coach now and whether he stays or goes. There's been a bit of talk about Aaron Glenn going there. The Lions defensive coordinator. And if he does, Kubiak might stay as defensive play caller. So they're sort of like the younger guys, like the up and coming guys, the guys that a lot of teams might want to talk to. There are going to be others. I can't go through every single young upcoming coordinator in the league, but there's some of the guys that are being mentioned. I have got a couple of names of experienced coaches as well. And the second one, some of you are going to go, interesting. And some of you are going to be shouting at me in the comments section for the second one. So let's see if you can guess in the comments whose name I'm going to bring up that some of you are going to hate. Before I get into the names, I wanted to bring this up, and I'm going to share the screen so that you can see this. So this was something that Brian Hawk Blogger mentioned, and he was having a conversation with Mike Sando, the great Mike Sando, and I don't know if they discovered it between them or whether it's something that Mike Sando brought up or Brian brought up. Then he noted that every head coach who has won the Super Bowl for the last 10 seasons has had a top coordinator who is a former head coach. Josh McDaniels with the Patriots had obviously had a stint with Denver, then went back to the Patriots. Wade Phillips had been a head coach with Denver, then went to the Broncos. Josh McDaniels again. Jim Schwartz had been a head coach with Detroit when he went back into being a coordinator in 2017 with the Eagles. Josh McDaniels again. Steve Spagnuolo had been a head coach of the Giants. Todd Bowles had been a head coach of the Jets. Raheem Morris had some head coaching experience on an interim basis with Atlanta. And then you've got Steve Spagnuolo again. Now, I think there is something to be said from having a very experienced coordinator alongside a young coach. And the other example I mentioned from this is Sean McVay was the youngest head coach in the league when he was appointed by the Rams, and he brought Wade Phillips with him. And Wade Phillips looked after the defense, and Sean McVay could concentrate on the offense. That is exactly the same kind of situation that the Seahawks are trying to recreate, just in reverse. So if you are going to have that situation, wouldn't it pay to have somebody very, very experienced who's been a head coach, who can be another mentor type for McDonald, but also be able to sort of run that offense with the benefit of experience? So that is the kind of thing that I think would be very appealing. But who are the people out there with that experience? Unless, I'm guessing they're not going to go after an Adam Gase or somebody like that. So therefore, who are the people, who are the candidates who have been head coaches in the recent history who could come in and be the top coordinator with that head coaching experience? Now, the obvious one, I'll stop sharing the screen now. The obvious one is Doug Peterson, who was fired today. He is from the Pacific Northwest. And Shad Khan, in his statement that he released once firing Peterson, said, I'm sure he's going to go on and have further success in the NFL. It might be just saying one of those things that he says. Or maybe not. Maybe there is an expectation that he's going to continue in the NFL. There was an interview, I think it was a press conference rather than an interview with Doug Peterson last week, where he spoke about if he's fired, then he thinks that may well be his last job. And Frank Reich, whose name I have remembered now, said something similar when he left the Panthers, that to them, they've made their money. Peterson's won a Super Bowl as a head coach. Maybe the fire's gone out for him. He just wants to enjoy his money, enjoy the rest of his life, and not go through the grind of the NFL anymore. He's still, I think, about 58, so he's not that old. He's not a typical retirement age, but he may want to retire, want to do other things. But if he was open-minded about coming back to the NFL, it would be a good fit. I think his personality and his character would be a good fit. He's not overbearing. He obviously did a very good job as a coordinator in the past. He's got connections to Andy Reid. We know that John Schneider, again, puts a lot of respect into Andy Reid. And I would not be surprised at all if they put a call in saying, can you come and have a conversation in Seattle with us about this job? And he may well says, no, thanks, I'm going to sit it out from now on. Or he may come in. And I think if he does come in, it would be an interesting candidate. And a lot of people are already saying he would be a good choice. And I wouldn't disagree. I think if they appointed Doug Peterson, I think it would be a very understandable appointment. Now, the other guy I'm going to bring up, and Damon sent this super chat in saying the name I'm thinking you might say is Ken Dorsey, who just got fired by the Browns. It's not Ken Dorsey. He's failed in his last 2 jobs, but I appreciate the super chat, Damon. And you've sent another very generous super chat in, which I'm going to come to, I promise, very shortly. One of you did. 2 of you have got the name that I'm thinking of. It's not Josh McDaniel, because I think he's going to end up going with Mike Vrabel to the Patriots. The name that I'm thinking of, some of you are going to hate this, is John Gruden. Now, why do I think that? Maybe it's just an overreaction to the fact that Mike McDonald quoted John Gruden today when he was speaking to 710 about the roller coaster of the NFL season. But rightly or wrongly, there has been talk of Gruden, an interest from Gruden from the NFL. And if you noticed in Jay Glazer's, I think it was Jay Glazer's little graphic that he had yesterday, he had Gruden's face on the list of offensive coaching candidates. Now, I don't think John Gruden's going to be a head coach in the NFL, but I think he wants to coach again. And he's sort of dipped his toe into the college thing. I think he's talked about it. Now, he would be a pretty controversial hire, given the email scandal, which is ongoing, which is, I think, in the courts and to be resolved. Some people would be comfortable with it, others wouldn't be. But I think he wants to coach again. And he is an old Green Bay guy. I believe he was in Green Bay when John Schneider was. He's an old Andy Reid coach. Holmgren coach. He's got those connections, basically what I'm trying to say. I don't know whether they would even give him a second thought. But the thing with him, and Peterson for that matter, is if you bring him in, I don't think either of those guys are going to get a head coaching job. So they're not going to get poached. They have been head coaches. They have been successful in the past. They've both won a Super Bowl. It's a long time ago for Gruden, admittedly. But Wade Phillips was an older guy with McVay, and Gruden's an older guy now. And he's very hands-on and very much an attention to details person. And while he might be a bit much as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator, maybe it would work. Someone has asked, quite rightly, in the comments, can Gruden submit to Mike McDonald? I don't know. And maybe he couldn't. Maybe he'd be too much. And that's another reason why I think they want Pete's, because I think Pete's is very similar to McDonald and there'd be a clear hierarchy there. But I was convinced by the pork blogger Mike Sando tweet series I read that maybe they need somebody who's got that experience, somebody who's been a head coach, someone who's done it. And when I heard McDonald quoting Gruden earlier, I thought maybe it's one of those subconscious things where it's in the back of his mind. It's someone that they've discussed. I don't know. And I'll tell you now, I am not saying I want that to happen. I don't know what I think about that. I'm just saying it as a name, as a suggestion. And I'm going to talk about different names. And he was just purely for the fact that the head coach quoted him. I thought I'm going to chuck his name out there. Anyway, let me know what you think. I think Jake Peetz will be the next defensive coordinator. You let me know what you think. I want to start running through these super chats, and I will do the super chats. And once they've all gone, I might take a few more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there. because it is just a solo stream at this point. Okay, Damon. Damon, you were incredibly generous with your super chats yesterday, and incredibly generous again, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you, man. Hey, Rob, your instinct was spot on. Grubb is God and McDonald is not playing around. He wants to establish a running game, and he wants an offensive coordinator who will balance the offense. In order to get the best results, is to hire the right guy and, more importantly, fix the O-line. Completely agree. And I think the best way to fix the offensive line is to go and get a couple of veterans, take the pressure off on the draft, but then still go and draft some people as well. And if your rookies don't start straight away, it doesn't matter. You've got some experienced, proven veterans in. I want them to go after Trey Smith if he hits free agency and go all in on him. And if he's not available, I'd like them to look at other people. There are not going to be 10 amazing offensive linemen who are going to be available in the offseason, but there are 5 or 6 who I think are interesting, who I think they should target, and they should be willing to pay a little bit more than they have been in the past to get some of them in. So I hope that they do fix that. That's, for me, that's priority number 2. Priority number 1 was this, coordinator. Next priority is fix the offensive line once they've hired a new offensive coordinator. Lethal Land says, please answer my question in the chat. Thank you, Rob. I don't know what your question is, Lethal Lance. I appreciate the super chat, but if you could send me that. He says, sorry, Rob, I'm broke. My questions are at the top, but I can't repost them. Okay, I will try and get to the top for you, Lance. But if you are going to send it, I just put it in the super chat. Okay, so I think I found it. Ben Johnson is the longest tenured offensive coordinator at 3 years. Does this show the importance of maybe finding a widespread offensive concept like the McVay system so you can easily replace your successful OCs? I think that's a great point. And yes, my answer to that is yes. I think you've always got to have one in the chamber, as John might say. You've got to have your offensive coordinator and you've got to have a right-hand man. The Lions have Ben Johnson. They have Tanner Engstrand. Whoever Seattle's next offensive coordinator is, you've got to have a right-hand man who can be the heir apparent. I agree with that. And Lethal Lance also says you probably want to avoid retooling your offensive personnel every time you get a new OC. Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Lance, for the super chat. Hawks fan Mattman says, after the mid-season personnel moves and firing of Grubb so quickly, I'm starting to think McDonald might be the kind of quiet killer this team needs. Completely agree. I think this was exactly the kind of news I needed to hear. It's got things going again for me because I think they needed to make a change. No disrespect to Ryan Grubb. They needed to make a change. It was no job for an NFL novice. And the fact that they have made the change, I think is impressive. And I agree with it. So yeah, I'm down with it. They're kicking off the offseason in the right way for me. Hawk Manny says, like the idea of Peterson as the Leslie Frazier of the offense, since the poaching risk by another team feels low. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, if you do get Doug Peterson, if he is interested in coaching again, I don't think he's going to get a third head coaching job. I mean, if things go absolutely amazingly well, he might get another chance. But he might not even want that other chance. Like I've been a head coach for the Eagles, won a Super Bowl. I've been a head coach in the Jaguars. It hasn't worked out. I've gone to Seattle. It's gone really well. I'm happy doing this until I'm done. That might be how he feels. So yeah, it's a much lower risk in terms of losing him. I suppose you could say, I've not tracked the Jaguars. How has his offense been? You know, is he even somebody that you want at this point? Are his better coaching days in the past? Are they in Philadelphia? Is I suppose what you could ask there. And he has not taken Trevor Lawrence to the next level. And that's what they brought him to do. So he may be a bit of a spent force. But if he's not, and if you believe in him, I think what you say there, Manny, is incredibly poignant. And thank you for that incredibly generous super chat. I much appreciate it. GFGB says, hey, Rob, thanks a lot for your work. What do you think about Adam Stenovich as offensive coordinator? And about the draft, what about Shamar Turner, the Texas A&M defensive tackle? I need to watch more Shamar Turner to give you an opinion on that, I'm afraid. But stay tuned. He's on my list. Adam Stenovich as offensive coordinator. He's the Packers offensive coordinator. So they would have to agree to let him speak to you. And I'm not sure they would do that for another NFC team. I don't think it's very likely for that regard. I know he's not the play caller, but because unless you were going to make him like assistant head coach or something, it's very hard to get them out of those jobs. And if the Packers really, really don't want to lose him, they can find ways to make him stay in Green Bay. So I think it's more likely they go after somebody who is not already offensive coordinator or somebody who has been a head coach or an offensive coordinator and is currently unemployed. Appreciate the super chat. Nano says you should do an article along the lines of 5 questions we need to ask John Schneider. I'm open-minded about doing something like that. I'd bloody love to interview John Schneider. I really, really would. I know it's never going to happen. I really would. It would not be a grilling. It would be a proper interview, but I think some questions need to be asked and he needs to be seen to be answering them. And I think it would do him the power of good. I really think sometimes you have to be seen to be facing the fire a little bit. I don't think it ever does you any harm if you come prepared and have thought about your answers in advance and the kind of things you want to say. It can reflect brilliantly on people in those positions. PO says, thank you, Rob, for the amazing coverage this regular season. I'm really excited for your streams for the off-season on how to get better. Appreciate that. There's going to be a lot of streams, a lot of videos, a lot of articles between now and May. Thank you for that. Nano says, more importantly, thank you. I'm prized your coverage since you were pounding the drum for Michael Crabtree. I think it means you followed. Yeah, that was a long time ago. That Michael Crabtree, that was the first draft we ever covered on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It's why I started the blog, because the Seahawks had got the 4th overall pick. They took Aaron Curry. I remember scream. Well, it wasn't so much a scream. It was a bit more masculine than that. It was more like a shout, like, no! When they drafted Aaron Curry, I really did not want them to draft Aaron Curry. I really wanted them to take Michael Crabtree. He didn't have an amazing career. Had a better career than Aaron Curry, though. That feels like such a long time ago, man. But appreciate you following for all of that time. It really means a lot. Thank you. And thank you for the 2 super chats. Glenn, thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that. Damon, we've already done that one. Thank you again, though, for your super chat. And Connor says, calling my shot, Chip Kelly. Rumors were that he got multiple interviews last year. Yeah, he did. I think talking to people, he had a real chance at the Seahawks job. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm not sure that. I think he might be happy at Ohio State. Like, if they win the national championship, does he just want to stick and do that? They're going to spend probably more than any other team in college football. He's going to have like a reloaded offense every single year. And he might just prefer to do that. Maybe he feels like got unfinished business in the NFL. I kind of feel like I'm done with that. Like, Chip Kelly's best success was in college football. I know he's been a head coach in the NFL a couple of times. It didn't work in Philadelphia. It didn't work in San Francisco. He's been a head coach at UCLA. It wasn't great there. At Ohio State, it's working now in the playoffs. Before that, I thought they were underwhelming during the regular season. The Michigan game in particular was a massive disappointment, and he got it wrong. And he's big mates with Todd McShay, and he held his hands up and said, I got it wrong, according to McShay. And he acknowledged that. But that was the biggest game of the season for Ohio State at the point, and they got it wrong. So I'm not sure, because they blew away Tennessee and Oregon, that I'm now going to start pining for Chip Kelly. I think I'd rather go in a different direction. I mean, it's a terrible shout, and I think he could be in the running, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether he's going to be the guy. Anyway, that is all the super chats, unless I'm mistaken. So if anybody has a last super chat to get to, I will come to it. If not, then I am going to wrap this up as a solo stream. But what I will say is that I'm going to do a lot of coverage. If people remember from last year, it was quite a hefty amount of coverage. I've got the next couple of days off work, so I'm going to be spending a lot of time on this story, on the Seahawks and their search for a new offensive coordinator. So subscribe to the channel, please. Let's get the subscriptions moving forwards. There's been a real uptick in the last couple of weeks in subscribers. Let's keep that going. Please like the video if you can. Please leave a comment in the comment section if you can. And don't forget to check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com. So I think that's pretty much it. I'll just say once again to finish that I think they made a right decision today, the Seahawks. I think it was predictable. I think it's been on the cards. We predicted it. Jeff and I have talked about it a lot. I know that Jeff and Brian have talked about it a lot. Oh, that's the well done, this man, for asking this, because that was something I was also going to bring up. Brief thoughts about McDonald's responses to Gino on Salk. I mean, the first thing I will say is, let me just find the quote so I can read it to you. And then I'll give my thoughts on it. So he basically said, is Gino going to be back next year? And then he kind of and ahed about it a little bit. I looked around the room and then said, got no reason to say no. So I guess, yeah. And then there was kind of like an awkward pause. And then he laughed and said that Dave Pearson, is it? Was laughing about it or liked the answer or something. Now, I don't think people should read too much into that. I think this is how Mike McDonald is. I think he speaks this way, and the way that he answered that question, well, my guess would be is how he thought. The people are saying play the audio. I can't play the audio, guys, because one, I'll probably get copyright struck by 710, and two, I haven't downloaded it, so I can't put it up yet. I think this is how Mike McDonald speaks. And I think he was just sort of straight back in that. But what I would say is they were completely non-committal about Geno Smith a year ago at this time. Like Mike McDonald wouldn't talk about him. He talked about Drew Lock. Ryan Grubb wouldn't talk about Geno Smith, but he would talk about Drew Lock. John Schneider would talk about Drew Lock a lot, but not Geno Smith. When John Schneider was asked a year ago about Geno Smith, he said something like he's the starter until he isn't. And it was totally non-committal. And then the minute they got past the combine and they understood that there probably wasn't going to be a change there, they probably weren't going to be able to draft somebody, they probably weren't going to be able to get somebody in. They traded for Sam Howell, immediately called him the backup. Everything changed, and all of a sudden, Geno's the guy. Geno's the starter. Geno's our man. We believe in Geno. And that the change was so stark that it was noticeable and interesting. They went from not saying anything about Geno Smith to Geno Smith was the best thing since sliced bread a few weeks later. And to me, it was the non-committal because we might be moving on from him. And then once they knew they weren't moving on from him, it was positive, 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 positive. So when I see Mike McDonald speak this way, I do think it's him straight back in the answer. But I also think it's noticeable that he could have just said, he absolutely will be back with us next year. Not a question. Or definitely, yeah. What a stupid question. Or he would have gone, of course he will be. Like, and instead there was kind of like that thought of like, how am I going to answer this? How am I going to answer it? Well, yeah, I guess so. And it does kind of lend itself to them being non-committal again. Now, what might happen is they might be thinking, okay, there's, what is it, March 16th or something, when there's this date on his contract. They might be thinking between now and then, a lot can happen. There's going to be negotiations. Are they going to be reasonable to come to a compromise deal? If not, are they going to be able to sit on $44.5 million as a cap hit? I would guess no. Therefore, are they going to be forced into a decision to save money? Are they going to have to release him just to let him hit the market and see what there is and then maybe bring him back? Are they going to have to move on? Are they going to try and do something else? Are they going to try and sign Sam Darnold? Are they going to try and do that? You know, there's all sorts of different things that could be up in the air right now. And it may be that they're going to be non-committal right up until the point when it dawns on them, like it did last year, that Geno Smith's going to be back, and then they might change the tune again. Or it might be that they just move on from Geno Smith this offseason, and that's that. And we have a different quarterback. So I do think it's interesting. I would say not to read too much into it, because I think that's just the way that Mike McDonald speaks. But it felt very much like last year, where they were being very non-committal about Geno Smith. And I did think that was interesting. XXSWWS on Super Chat says, thanks for your Seahawks coverage, and my wife loves your accent, so she's good with me watching your videos on the living room TV. Laugh out loud. Love it. And thank you to your wife for enjoying my Yorkshire accent. I appreciate that. And really appreciate the super chat as well and the kind words. And thank you to everybody who sent the super chats in. I hope I've kind of answered it. I think the Geno Smith topic is going to be a really interesting topic for the next 6 weeks. I'm fascinated to see what happens, but I'm also fascinated to see what happens with the offensive line and the offensive coordinator. So anyway, that's it. We've done 45 minutes solo stream. If there's any developments on anything this offseason, I'm going to try and jump on a stream straight away. So keep an eye out for that. That's why subscribing, you won't miss anything, or I'll do a video. And there'll definitely be articles up on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. There's one up now discussing my thoughts on the firing of Ryan Grubb. So go and read that on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Again, like the video. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a comment if you can in the comment section. Really appreciate all your super chats to all the patrons out there as well. Thank you for that. Someone has said in the comments about mock drafts. There are going to be a ton of mock drafts coming your way over the next few weeks. In fact, I was writing one last night. So lots more to come on the way. The offseason's up and running after 1 day already. Ryan Grubb has gone, and it's a new era for the Seahawks in terms of their offense. Hopefully, they're going to get this appointment right. Anyway, that's all for now. Enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, bye for now.